Good morning. I'm Pippa Adams and I'm presenting along with Vicky, Owen and Kelly Sinclair here. And we're going to share our experiences of working as part of the Strategic Pipeline Alliance with Anglian Water. We're going to present how we have collaboration at the heart of the project, share a brief overview of our excavations in Lincolnshire, or some of our excavations, and set out the legacy of the project. Very short introduction. Strategic Pipeline Alliance is a group of consultancies and delivery partners which, starting in 2020, was tasked with designing and building a new series of water pipelines running from North Lincolnshire down to Colchester to provide system resilience in response to increasing population, and therefore water demand and climate change. The Spa Archaeology team has been working with fieldwork partners shown on screen since 2020, and we have completed a large amount of archaeological and geoarchaeological evaluations, including 3,000 plus trial trenches and culminating in 80 archaeological excavations, with just 2 more left to complete. We've also completed approximately 18 kilometres of geoarchaeological monitoring. We're nearly there, but we still have quite a bit of monitoring left to do. I'm going to talk about collaboration first. So SPA was initially set up with collaboration as one of its key expectations and goals. The Alliance subscribes to Project 13 principles, and seeks to develop a new business model based on an enterprise, not on transactional arrangements, to boost certainty and productivity in delivery, improve whole life outcomes in operation, and support a more sustainable, innovative, highly skilled industry. This approach applies to every part of SPA, and for a lot of SPA people, this was a change to their traditional way of working. There were and still are hiccups. Things haven't always run smoothly, and we know we could have done some things better over the last 5 years. And as we move into the next water asset management plan, we're working to ensure lessons learnt are taken forward into the next phase of SPA. From the start, within the SPA Archaeology team, we've tried to foster a collaborative environment, and this has worked very well. And we had members from different consultancies bringing different lessons learnt to the project, and we developed a very supportive and productive team. We've also tried to build that same collaborative approach with our fieldwork partners. Though those of us in SPA Archaeology team were all field archaeologists once, most of us haven't picked up a trowel in earnest for years, and we therefore fully understand that we need direct input from our fieldwork partners to try to ensure that what we are proposing is achievable. And collaboration doesn't just extend to our organisation and fieldwork partners. Despite the extensive area covered by the scheme, with it being only 40 metres wide in general, we have had very little interaction with other archaeological investigations, with the exception of the area southeast of Lincoln, where through the help of Ian George, the Historic Places Manager at Lincolnshire County Council, we've been able to share results with Network Archaeology, working on the Lincoln Eastern Bypass scheme, and aim to do the same with the Heikenham Relief Road project team. We've also worked with external groups to share our results where possible. And at Bracebridge Heath, which Kelly is going to talk about in a little bit, we undertook public outreach with the Scouts and the local Young Archaeologists Club, as well as Wings to the Past. And we gave children hands-on experience of using Roman measuring tools right on the site adjacent to Ermine Street. Persuading the principal contractor that we could do this safely took some doing. And in the end, the activities were carried out on a weekend to avoid any potential construction / members of the public interface. It fell within a period when the site excavations had been completed and such activities could be accommodated, but it did allow for the children to experience hands-on exposure to Roman remains as well. This collaborative approach has guided our stakeholder engagement throughout. We've worked with stakeholders to mitigate impact to archaeological remains through rerouting, and changing construction method to allow for preservation in situ where possible. We've invited a number of advisors to our sites. For example, Lincolnshire Roman Villa expert Steve Willis was invited to our Bracebridge Heath site. Steve has been excavating similar sites in Lincolnshire, sharing his expertise garnered from across the county and providing much needed insights to our interpretations. Steve has also worked extensively with the East Midlands Regional Research Framework, therefore his insights are extremely valuable. Recognising the need for further input, we also invited Historic England regional science advisors to a number of our sites, allowing for review and consideration of sampling techniques and strategy for these sites. Though it is not in any way unusual or innovative to avoid impacts or to invite external advisors to site, we've tried to work with stakeholders proactively to overcome challenges, to build trust and to do all that we can to produce high quality results following Project 13 pillars and principles and the Anglian Water's key behaviour of collaboration. I'll now hand over to Vicky, who will present some highlights from a very busy and varied site at Spridlington in Lincolnshire.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a bit about the logistics of the work that we did, not just at Spridlington, but more widely. Whilst the majority of the spa archaeological work for us has been ongoing since 2020, the core phase of mitigation across the spa north extent peaked in about 2023. Our composite teams of York Archaeology, Oxford Archaeology and Pre-Construct Archaeology, in partnership as the Spa Archaeology North joint venture, were at the height of operation deploying more than 50 archaeologists every week across 38 open area excavations, often operating between 8 and 10 sites at a time across 3 or 4 county boundaries. With the geographical dispersal of the sites, this required a huge collaborative effort between our SPAN joint venture, team of consultants, principal contractors, stakeholders and local county authorities, with communications happening all the time from every conceivable angle. The results provide a transect through the landscape of East Anglia, of which we will now only briefly mention 2 examples from Lincolnshire, myself and Kelly next. So the excavations at Spridlington began as a relatively small pair of sites measuring about 3/4 of a hectare in total, and utilised a composite team from York, Oxford and Pre-Construct Archaeology. The excavation area corridor was planned against the results of previous trenching, which suggested small-scale ditched or pit features typical of the area, which were probably late prehistoric or Roman in date. Geophysical survey undertaken by magnitude surveys equally revealed only small pockets of possible archaeology that seemed to accord with the results of trenching, indicating low-level, utilitarian, possibly peripheral activity. On opening the excavation, the site very quickly turned from an 8-week excavation programme into a mammoth 6-month project, as the site strip revealed a densely occupied area spanning the late Iron Age to the late Roman period across the now 2-hectare corridor of the scheme. The site is characterised by a dense network of multiply recut ditched boundaries, pits and a series of wells. Evidence for domestic occupation and other craft production waste was widespread in the form of ceramic and faunal remains and other domestic artefacts, although structural evidence was limited to a single fragment of painted plaster and small quantities of CBM and roof tile. The very small portion of fine wares, metalwork and coins of the period would appear to also suggest a fairly low-level rural site, although the presence of 2 jet pins recovered, one of which is photographed at the top there, are of greater significance. Faunal and environmental remains provide good evidence for the agricultural economy of the site, with the wells and watering holes at the south of the site perhaps related to this animal husbandry. I've just added a couple of images here to show the geophysical survey of a portion of what ended up being the full extent of the site. And on the right is an example of the post-excavation site plan, which just goes to show the importance of ground truth in your surveys. So one particular very interesting aspect of this site actually wasn't the very densely occupied archaeological area. It was over the other side of the hedge, which was this small area. So after the density of features on the other side of the hedge, this area was noticeable almost by its sparsity of features, that arguably form the more interesting archaeological data to be recovered from the site. A series of parallel pits separated from the main focus of activity provided evidence of clay preparation and mixing with crushed fossil shell, likely related to pottery production nearby. The groups of shell pits represent an interesting and significant insight into the local production of shell-tempered pottery wares in the region, although importantly, no kilns were identified within the excavation area. The pits were arranged into 2 linear groupings with some outlying features suggestive of deliberate organisation and land planning of the preparation process, with tighter groupings of intercut pits suggesting individual working areas. The fills of the pits were distinctive, consisting of light blue-grey natural clays and layers of crushed shell, sometimes together, but some with pits apparently storing these separately. These fills also occasionally yielded fragments of deliberately crushed, previously made pottery, with blown or broken pottery being reused and worked into the prepared clay. External to our site, comparative evidence for pits storing raw materials such as clay, calcite and shell as part of the pottery production process have previously been noted in earlier contexts dating to the Late Bronze Age, but are rare within the context of these Roman period wares. Where Roman pottery production sites have been extensively excavated, clay preparation pits, workshop structures and kilns are often found in close proximity. These linear schemes, operating in relatively small corridors, present a limitation in understanding the fuller context of the site and the extent of the pottery production occurring here. But they also present huge opportunities for further external research in the wider area. Early petrographic analysis of some of the Spridlington pottery fragments within these preparation pits has shown that at least some of the pottery identified on site was made using clay from the area, whilst other similarly made undifferentiated shell-tempered ware from the site may have been sourced or produced in northern Lincolnshire. This didn't seem to inhibit their reuse in on-site pottery production, and both pottery types have been identified within the preparation pits, so they were using anything they had on site. And that's all I have to say for Spridlington at the moment, although there's a lot to unpick in the story there. So our next speaker, Kelly, is going to be discussing another of our Lincolnshire sites located 14 miles to the south at Bracebridge Heath, which was on Digging for Britain.
Right, okay. So our site at Bracebridge Heath, we have sort of 3 excavation areas that were approximately 5 kilometres south of the centre of Lincoln. Prior to the excavation, we sort of knew that the route of the pipeline went over parts of Ermine Street, and there's this area that was sort of generally known as the Roman settlement of Waddington. So we sort of had some idea of what might have been going on. The geophysics did identify a lot of boundary ditches, enclosures, and an area of dense anomalies, but it was unclear in determining any sort of structural remains. The trial trenching, however, did identify several stone foundations, floors, and some hearths or ovens. So we thought there was going to be some kind of settlement there, perhaps a roadside settlement. There we go. So in area 14, we did reveal part of Ermine Street. That sort of picture down on the right there. We found some of the surface intact. It showed signs of use. There were real ruts running through it, and also episodes of sort of repair with stones as well. I'm focusing here on the excavations sort of on the other side of sort of the main road going through there. In area 15, you can see upon stripping, the sort of pinkish layer there was an extensive layer of demolition material which contained large amounts of pottery, ceramic building material, metalwork, coinage, like it was chock full of stuff. After a sort of painstaking hand removal of this, what was revealed below this was a series of stone foundation walls of a large building complex made up of at least 9 adjoining rooms. There were lots of other features associated with the building, including ovens. We had 2 lime kilns, floors, hearths, several neonate burials. There's so much more I could probably mention, but I don't really have the time today. Oh, we've gone too far. There we go. So the settlement here, we think, may have started out as a farmstead with quite a few of these sort of corn dryer ovens that predated the building, along with sort of ditched enclosures. I think possibly it could have been used in the sort of bulk processing of grain, possibly for the military. Obviously, Lincoln began as a fortress and then became the colonia of Lindum after that. During the assessment process, though, our interpretation has changed. I think due to some of the finds we had there, a lot of the CVM that we had, sort of all the Roman sort of key forms, but we did have some box flue, which sort of pointed to something a bit more high status. We have a lot of imported wares, amphora, Samian, In particular, we have at the centre here this inscription stone that we found. We think this is most likely to come from a tombstone. Half of the phrase there, I think it contained the phrase posuit desuo, excuse my Latin, but meaning it was set up to commemorate the person from his own resources. So it's a big show of wealth. All these sort of finds coming together, a lot of the metalwork was more personal items, a high percentage. We thought, no, this is not just a roadside settlement, it's something higher status. When we look at the area of Bracebridge Heath, there was always thought to be a villa to the south of this area, but what we're actually wondering, like, is this actually the villa? The arrangement of the rooms, the high status material, it might be that we've had sort of a villa estate grow up sort of in the hinterland of Lincoln. We're bang on, sort of, we're on the edge of Ermine Street, and this is the site here. You can see, if anyone knows Lincolnshire, there's this huge ridge that it's sort of situated on. They're right in the gateway to Lincoln, so it's quite important when you think about where it lies in the landscape. We're very much at the assessment phase at the moment, but I think this is going to have a lot of, it's going to contribute significantly to many of the research aims of the East Midlands in terms of what we know about sort of hinterland settlements. This has been a very, very brief intro just because of time. There's lots to go on. So I think, exciting things to come with Bracebridge Heath anyway. Back to Phillippa.
There you go. So I just wanted to speak briefly about one of the research legacies from SPA. I think by way of the material artefact recovery that we have, pottery is probably one of the main unifying links across all of the SPA North and probably South sites as well, I imagine, although I'm not familiar with them. So I just wanted to touch on this aspect of the growing research legacy from SPA as a bit of a food for thought, really. Whilst analysing the later prehistoric pottery from across the East Midlands and East of England, it's become quite apparent that this linear scheme has the potential to contribute hugely to the current debates on pottery typologies in the context of intra-regional working, and in particular on the pottery recording strategies that are employed usually on a regionally specific basis. How are we accounting for this variation, and can or should we be? The data sets recovered from SPA excavations has the potential to provide holistic narratives of pottery production and dissemination across a much wider geographical area, and can provide necessary debate for groups such as PCRG on further enhancing the protocols for identifying ceramic sequences and the relationships between regional and national period chronologies. So I'm going to hold my hands up here and say I'm not a pottery specialist in any sense of the word. So if anyone has any questions about the pottery debate, please ask David Knightingstead.
I'm just going to talk a little bit about the fenland legacy. So part of the SPA project runs through quite a lot of fenland, and it has posed considerable challenges, not just in relation to archaeological evaluation and risk management, but also for other disciplines. We've worked with Mola and York Archaeology to develop specific strategies and in particular relating to the sections of the scheme that run through the different sections of the fen. I'm going to cut this short because I've just had a 2-minute warning. So we've done, we did quite a lot of evaluation work. We did LiDAR assessment, aerial imagery mapping, and targeted evaluation trenches. And we also produced a conceptual model, hydrogeological conceptual model to establish that the impacts of dewatering wouldn't extend beyond our area of impact. We also identified areas of higher priority, such as the paleo channels and rodents, and we were able to put in some targeted trial pits in advance of construction on one of the schemes. This was another collaborative effort, and it involved lengthy discussions with the principal contractor and temporary works designer to agree a safe way of work. Obviously, there's a deep and big pits, and in a wet environment, it's quite dangerous. So it was. We obviously got there in the end, but it took a long time to agree a way forward, and we definitely learnt the value of designers with on-site experience as well. We didn't discover another must farm in the end. Our evaluation work was successful in that we'd identified the higher priority areas in advance. We took many samples, hundreds, thousands of samples across this 18-kilometre stretch of pipeline, and we're hoping that they'll be used as the post-ex work gets underway to provide an updated model for the East Anglian fenland. York Archaeology are currently planning to mobilise to site for another stretch of the scheme, running through the Cambridgeshire and Norfolk fen, and we're hoping to take the opportunity here to target deposits for sampling which could potentially be used to build up a data set and enhance our understanding of the chronologies of fenland development through that section as well. Results which could potentially be used to inform future studies. So in conclusion, the SPAR project has and continues to work in collaboration with multiple stakeholders to use the opportunity of such a large-scale peek into the landscape to provide meaning results, update our understanding and inform future research goals. And I think I've probably spelt people's names wrong, so apologies.